Hello and welcome to one of the first tutorials in this series that looks at Kate Constable's novel Crow Country. Today we'll be looking at chapter 1, but before I begin I probably should explain how this tutorial works and ways that you can use some of the information conveyed to better your understanding of the text. Firstly, you'll notice that on the text I've highlighted in a range of colours, and I've tried to use a consistent colour scheme all the way through the book just because that helps me to identify different examples and helps me to understand what I'm reading through. So I thought I'd share that with you so that you might use something similar. You can use exactly the same system if you wish, but it's entirely up to you. You'll notice that I have some sections in yellow, and there are only a few here. Yellow is typically something associated with plot, so something to do with the action or something important in the series of events. My green relates to characters, so anything that relates specifically to character I highlight there. Blue is focused on setting. My purple, this links to different ideas that are contained within the text. And last but not least, the pink. When I highlight material in pink, usually it's in relation to some sort of literary device or language feature that I think is important. Now, it's important that you understand that it's not easy to stick to that colour scheme, because sometimes you highlight a particular quotation and it links to more than one of those areas. So you just have to highlight according to which you think it fits best, and you'll notice that that happens quite a bit as we go through some of the examples. Now, I'm not going to read the chapter to you. I'm going to assume that you can do that yourself. But I will go through and look at some of the more important quotations. Perhaps not all of the ones I've highlighted, but certainly some of the more important ones, just so that you're getting an understanding of the text, particularly in these initial chapters where it's establishing a lot of the setting and the characters and the ideas. We probably need to go through those in a bit more detail. Now, the reason I've used my colours to look at those features of the novel is because whenever you do an analysis of a text like this, they're the sorts of features you should be looking for anyway. And having good notes on plot, character, setting, ideas and literary devices should prepare you for any kind of response you might be expected to construct. Alright, let's get stuck into it. Let's have a look at what some of these significant quotations reveal. The first one here, this opening paragraph, is a very short paragraph. We can see that it says, "The crow wheeled high in the clear winter sky." And this short opening paragraph introduces the central theme of the novel. And it's about the crows. And it has this very singular focus. And that short paragraph emphasizes the significance of this image or this motif that's to be developed further. Then we move on to this lovely description in the second paragraph here. The lines of the creeks and the bumps and sags of the hills and swamps held stories of the country's ancient history, the marks of its creation. And this descriptive language highlights the importance of the dreaming or the dream time, which is significant in Aboriginal spiritual beliefs. The stories of the dreaming often refer to the creation of the landscape, as well as other spiritual elements of their world. And this description ties in nicely, or introduces that concept quite nicely. As we move down to this fourth paragraph here, the crow swooped lower. It laughed its mocking laugh. Wah, wah, wah. And we have the sound imagery that's contained within this. And we hear that quite a bit throughout the text. It's an important, again, motif that's represented. But by personifying this crow and having its mocking laugh, we see it as this sort of human-like character, and we start to judge it as having much more human-like qualities because of the relationship that it develops with Sadie over the next few chapters. Don't forget too that crows are an important symbol in many cultures, often representing things like death. They are omens, they are full of fear and the unknown. There are other more positive connotations associated with them in some other cultures. Later in this chapter, we are introduced to Sadie, and she is our protagonist. And her first words in the text are, "Stupid bird," Sadie muttered to herself. She aimed a pebble at the battered, rusting side beside the narrow track, and then she noticed what it said, Lake Invergarry. So we're getting introductions to both people and place at the same time here. And if we have a look at the setting is introduced to the reader, probably suggesting that there's a connection between both character and setting. And it moves on to describe the place as this little town of Bort. This sort of affectionate description introduces the significance of having a connection with place, which is a very important idea that is developed in the text. And this terminology here, the little town of Bort, implies there is a sense of familiarity or something that is known about this place. For Sadie, that's not the case, but for other people, there is that connection. And small rural towns, as we know, are often stereotyped as being small and quiet and not really places for young people. They're boring and dull, and they have those connotations of not really being the most inspiring places for young people to grow up, particularly for someone like Sadie, who's moved out from the city. We were also introduced to Ellie, and this is Sadie's mum, and she has much more of a connection with this little town of Bort. She has a history in this place and spent part of her childhood here. We continue with more of this sort of description of the land, of the location. The caravan park hummed with people, thick as flies, also Ellie said. And these are part of her memories, and this is the world that she remembers of Bort, and she remembers how popular and busy it was. And we'll see if this is how it is today as the story unfolds. And then we get a bit of the background. Mum and her cousins had come to Bort every holiday to stay with her grandmother when they were kids 1,000,000 years ago. So it's a good example of exaggeration here, or hyperbole perhaps, with that reference to the 1,000,000 years ago. And this is where Sadie's demonstrating the vast chasm that exists between her and her mother, not just in terms of age, but in terms of liking little towns like Bort. And this sort of quotation highlights Sadie's lack of connection with this place. She doesn't understand what it is that Ellie has in terms of her connection with this town. We have some more sound imagery, or in this case the onomatopoeia that's represented with the wah wah of the crow. And it's a very distinguishable Australian sound, whether we call them crows or ravens. In many cultures, we understand we understand that reference just from hearing the sound. And as I've said, the crow is a motif, so it's a reoccurring symbol or image that pops up in many chapters in this text, playing quite a pivotal role in the development of the plot. And then we get these sorts of descriptions, the call drawn out like a sing-song jeer. Crow seems to be everywhere around here, pecking at the roadkill, flapping round the lake edge, staring at Sadie with their flat, bright eyes. They gave her the creeps. So we're kind of already establishing a bit of conflict here. Like there's this untrusted element in the crows that Sadie has, and I would assume that we as an audience would probably share that with her. She fears the crows, and it sort of shows that she doesn't understand, and she doesn't understand this place, and that will be one of the challenges for Sadie as she tries to become a member of this community. And using that sound imagery, it's really good. It provides a bit of a soundscape so that we have a better picture or image of this little town. Let's move on to the next page. This is disappointing because as Sadie experiences this place, she just discovers that there is no lake, and this symbolises, I suppose, the change in this setting, because even locations like this, they develop and evolve, they change over time, and it's been quite a while since Ellie has been in this place, and it's changed quite a bit. And so I suppose because the place changes, our expectations should change as well, and as we alter and we grow because we've been separated from a place, we don't feel the same, or we don't feel as positive about that setting anymore. And this sort of description highlights, I don't know, a sense of desperation that's attached now to this particular setting. Let's continue. Sadie scuffed along the track until it disappeared. The lake bed had cracked apart into a crust of thick silt the colour of parchment. Sadie poked a cake of yellow mud with her toe, and it crumbled into dust. Tussocks of some low, clumpy plant with a soft purple feather of a flower had spread across the ground. Sadie had never seen it before. So like Sadie, we are in this unfamiliar environment trying to make sense of the world around us, and as we progress through the text, we're learning about the world through Sadie's eyes. And this is a common technique that's employed, particularly in the opening few chapters of the text, to try and establish the world and the surroundings and the characters simultaneously. But the use of language, the clarity of the description, is quite impressive there. The crow called again, hoarse creaking lament of wah, wah, wah. More of that sound imagery, and it filters in through so much of this text. A little bit more setting here. At first glance, the lake bed had seemed wide and flat and featureless, but now Sadie saw objects thrusting up through the mud. The blackened bones of dead trees and tumbled piles of bricks. There had been buildings there and bush before the valley was flooded, and everything was drowned. But now the waters had retreated to reveal what they destroyed: a broken down wall, rotted stumps furred with yellow mud. Highly descriptive writing that isolates and identifies certain aspects of the setting, while at the same time developing the mood and tone of this text. It's a bit eerie, it's a bit ominous, which fits nicely with the genre. It is a mystery that needs to be solved, and we need to sort of, I suppose, get our teeth into what this place is like, and looking at the intricacies of it, and that's developed well in paragraphs like this. It's not the most beautiful imagery, but it's fascinating nonetheless. And it continues. A couple of 100 metres from the ruins, Sadie found a cluster of skeletal tree trunks with what looked like crooked sticks scattered beneath them, some upright in the ground, as if planted there in echo of the dead trees. And she realises that these used to be little white crosses. She stumbled across what is a burial ground, and this would have been covered by the lake at some stage. So these are not the most pleasant images and these are not the sorts of things that you would want to welcome you to this new location. But this is the reality of what Sadie's coming across here. Not the most pleasant things. They are in some ways intriguing. They're not appealing, but they are intriguing to our character and to us. And of course we know that the little white crosses is a very Christian symbol of marking the place where someone has been buried. So it's a celebration of a past life, of the loss of a human. But this is all very Western culture, very Christian sort of culture. It further describes some of the landscape here. It undulated, dipped and rose like the back of an enormous scaly beast with immense muscles rippling beneath its damp, cracked skin. Lumpy warts of boulders marked the surface. Now, this is a description of the setting, so you probably think it should be in blue, but I've got it in pink here because I really think that this is a great example of this descriptive writing and how we've got the landscape being described as this scaly beast. So this metaphor, and obviously this scaly beast is supposed to fill you with fear and dread and horror. And that's how she's feeling about that landscape. So it links back to what I was talking about before in terms of establishing the mood and the tone of this particular section of the text. Let's skip forward. Now we've got this reaction. A chill travelled up Sadie's spine like an icy hand, and every hair on her neck stood up. So we've got some really emotional sections in this chapter as well. But this simile describing the reaction that Sadie had sort of captures really vividly how we might respond in such a circumstance. So it's very realistic sort of writing. And then as we move on, we get this dialogue here. This is Crow's Place. And this emphatic statement from this spirit bird, this dialogue is both surprising and it's the first representation of the spirit world that we uncover as part of this text. So I don't want to talk about it too much, but you have to understand that there are some spiritual and mystical elements involved here. And this quotation, beginning and ending, always the same, always now. The game, the story, the riddle, hiding and seeking, beginning and ending, always. This is a very confusing part of the text, and it sounds like the voice of, to me, some sort of wise elder trying to teach a younger person. But they don't know what the lesson is, and that's part of the mystery. You've got to work things out for yourself. The lessons are there. You probably know the answers. You've just got to make the connections, and you've got to find those connections. And that's how this is sort of written. And it's in this very sort of staccato beat, isn't it? The beginning and ending, always the same, always now, and this sort of cyclical nature of it all. It's a fascinating way to think about how our lives actually function and the roles that we play in terms of our relationships with people and places. And you'll notice too that when you read through this, it doesn't sound like the way the rest of the text is written. This dialogue captures another sort of a dialect of English, other than formal Australian English. So, and that'll be revealed later in the text, of course, but really good use of dialogue to capture the different ways of not only speaking, but the values and attitudes associated with that character are really well presented there. And then the chapter ends with this: the air thrummed with silence. Such an oxymoron. You can't have this thrumming and still have it silence. it's as if there is a sense of confusion that has been established through such descriptions. Well, I hope that's helped you understand Chapter 1 just that little bit more, and I hope you were able to take quite a few of those notes. Don't forget, you can always go back and pause and take down the materials as you need it. I'll see you again for your analysis of Chapter 2. This has been an ETV production brought to you by Prendeville Catholic College.